but on a Tuesday, I like to, what is today, Monday? I like to keep my scruples if I can.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Welcome to Word of Mouth. I am in a new location. Who am I sitting across from?
Sitting across from Tyden Rickard. And this is my apartment. Very nice to have you here. Thanks for making the trip out to downtown.
All the way downtown.
All
really
the way
far
downtown.
hike for me.
It
was a
traffic
whole
wasn't too bad.
6 minutes.
Yeah, gotta love Birmingham, man.
Yeah. Tyden, you've got a crazy story. And I'm excited to dive in. Brief overview, like what do you spend your time doing?
I would call myself a filmmaker, and that takes a lot of forms of whether it's like short forms for brands or narrative content. And I'm fortunate to call my work also my passion. So like you can think of it as like working all the time, but I do genuinely enjoy doing these things late at night. So I spend quite a lot of time, even outside of working hours, editing, just like experimenting with different sound design transitions. Outside of filming, I love to travel and explore. I think maybe I had like some form of cabin fever when I was growing up in South Alabama and just like peanut fields and dirt roads. And so in my adult life, I've been fortunate to travel for some projects and like have the means to explore. And I still like haven't lost a bug to travel. So anytime I have like a brief stint of time where I don't have to be anywhere, I like to hit the road and just be somewhere foreign and ideally in a language that I don't understand. That's probably like my favorite way to spend free time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk to you is I'm interested in people who integrate their passion with their career. I think a lot of people want to do that and don't know how. And for some people, that passion is more obvious. Like if you're really good at math and numbers and you like finance, then obviously you're going to make a lot of money doing that. But sometimes in the creative fields, it's a little more difficult to integrate that. So I want to go back to the beginning. How did you find a camera, filmmaking, photography, whatever? Where does that journey begin for you?
Yeah, the journey began at a very young age, completely by accident. So we moved from suburbia in Dothan, Alabama to the country. And my mom made a rule where in the summertime, if the sun was up, I had to be outside. And at that point, I had a very unhealthy obsession with Minecraft and Call of Duty. So I didn't really know how to spend all the time I had during the day outside. And walked to my neighbor's house to see if he would play basketball with me. And he happened to be obsessed with making horror movies.
Interesting.
At the age of like 11.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight is really concerning.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
But it did not really raise a red flag for me. And we made a deal where he would play basketball in the driveway if I would help him film his horror movie acting scenes.
Okay.
And it would be on his mom's QVC camcorder. And they had like a family computer with Windows Movie Maker on it. And like 5 royalty-free tracks installed. So every video had one of the same 5 tracks as like the backing. And I would help him film whatever scene he came up with, which normally included like the cat being possessed or something. And I would watch him import the footage and seeing him like layer on the music and add transitions and turn this like raw video that we just shot around the house into something that I thought was like cinema was endlessly fascinating. And I very quickly stopped playing basketball and just spent as much time as possible making horror movies with my neighbor. Much to my mother's dismay because she was not really
probably not on
the
board.
Horror movie scene.
And
I started in 6th grade, and I was never a good student because I had trouble focusing in class and just would like dream about what video I could make after school with my neighbor. But to my surprise, our big project in 6th grade science class was to make a video. And so I poured my heart and soul into this meteorology video and showed it to the class. And right after I showed it, the teacher was like, "Can you come see me after class?" And normally that meant like break detention.
Usually
like
that's a bad thing.
for talking. I was like majorly concerned. And so I like very nervously approached her desk and she said, "You're not in trouble, but I'm looking for someone to make a video." And explained that she ran the school's robotics program, but that robotics kind of became for the nerds and that kids were not joining and they were like pretty much going to have to shut down the program if memberships didn't pick up. And she offered to pay me $100 to make a marketing video to make robotics seem exciting to my friends in middle school.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's insane.
$100 when you're in 6th grade is
$100.
a lot of money.
Yeah, I was like about to go apartment hunting and tell mom I'm like moving out next year.
My wife and I talk often about how difficult it is to discern good advice on the internet when it comes to health, wellness, skincare, those kind of things. We always have these videos of people doing their skincare routines popping up on our timelines, and it's just difficult to understand. Is all of that stuff necessary and actually helpful? And really the best way to determine that is to talk to a professional. So I have some new friends at Total Dermatology, and they would love to be that professional that you go talk to. They have offices all over Birmingham. It's a really solid group of people over there. If you want someone to go through and audit your skincare routine and make sure that what you're doing is actually useful and helpful and gets rid of all the acne and the rashes and all of that kind of stuff, go talk to Total Dermatology. They have a great crew. Same week availability. They take all the insurances, all that kind of stuff. Again, really awesome people. Go check them out. Back to the episode.
And I pretty much saw this as like a hack to get unlimited like McDonald's and AMC spending money.
Yep.
And thought like if I can make like one of these videos every 6 months, like I'm pretty much set for the rest of my social life.
100%.
And so I went home and I spent like a good chunk of that $100 on printing business cards and just called it T. Rickard Productions.
Yeah.
Which was a completely fake business. There was there was no website, there was no portfolio. At this point, I was rocking with an iPod Touch that had a camera on it. It was like the first generation.
Fantastic.
Maybe 4 megapixels.
Yeah.
And the $5 iMovie app.
Yep.
But in hindsight, it was a big blessing that I wasn't in Nashville or Atlanta where there was like an actual community of filmmakers. Like in Dothan, it was pretty much like the news station and 2 guys that were making videos in my hometown. And so I thought maybe I can like pick up some business and get some spending money. So I handed these business cards out to pretty much all of my friends that had dads who had businesses and went home and like waited by the phone expecting it to ring off the hook. And it was crickets.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And like 4 or 5 months go by and I get no business and I sort of like forget about the idea entirely and realize maybe this is a pipe dream.
Yeah.
Until eventually I get a call from a middle-aged woman asking for a pageant farewell video. Mm-hmm. And I was not really tapped into the pageant community.
Yeah.
Didn't know like what a farewell video was.
I would say most young men are not.
Yeah, exactly. I like didn't know if this was a scam or what. But like around like 2012 to 2015, every pageant winner would create this like very sappy Bruno Mars farewell video with like a bunch of pictures from like the greatest year of their life and then this like, you know, very sentimental voiceover. And these moms were willing to pay blank checks for these videos.
Wow.
And she offered me $250, which I thought at the time was like
a mountain of money.
Exactly. I was like looking for a safe to put this in, basically, and like get some rubber bands and get somebody to count it for me.
Yeah. You were house shopping.
Yeah, exactly. And so I made this pageant farewell video and they played it at the Miss Peanut pageant, which
huge
like
deal.
in Dothan. Yes. This
Huge
is like
deal.
the Met Gala essentially of Dothan. And all
not
the
just
other
Dothan,
moms,
like South Alabama.
Sure.
I mean,
I would say the whole region gets behind the peanut in a very beautiful way.
Yeah.
And
I know a girl who is whatever Miss Peanut is in like 2000 mid-teens.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
She probably still has clout from that.
Yeah. Shelly Beatty. I don't know if you...
Doesn't ring a bell, but it should.
It's good.
I should know who this is. And all of the other moms watched the video that I made and then called me to make their daughter's farewell video.
Oh, yeah.
And overnight, I was cemented in the pageant farewell video pipeline.
Yeah, you were.
And at first, I thought this was like the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I was like cashing $250 projects like once a month or something.
Yeah.
And then by like the 9th or 10th video, I was sitting in my dining room with this like, sometimes it was like a 5-year-old girl who couldn't read yet. So she would like, the mom would like whisper 2 words in her ear and then she would like say it into the microphone and like whisper 2 words. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that I should reevaluate this life plan.
Uh-huh.
And
so horror movies.
From horror movies to pageants, which is the logical next step.
It's a pipeline. It's a
yeah, exactly. Yeah. The path is broad in the horror movie to pageant move.
Yeah.
And eventually I was like, I don't really know how to get out of the pageant business, but I'm making like fairly good money. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably 13 or 14.
Okay.
About to go into high school.
So before you go further, from the beginning, it seems like being paid to make videos was like pretty integral in that process. Was
For sure.
Like when you're making horror movies to first paid project at school, what's that timeline like?
Yeah, I think I started making horror movies in 4th grade, and then I got the gig in 6th grade.
Okay.
So it was like 2 years.
So a couple of years of messing around.
Yeah,
Before
like
you,
2 years of messing around. And even after the first paid gig, like I pretty much got no creative excitement from the pageant farewell videos. So that was like strictly like bread and butter work to like get another lens or a camera, like eventually got like a MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And I was still very much like making short films on the weekends. I would like get my stepsisters in there as actresses. I would like anytime I traveled, I would like rope whoever like family was at like the gathering into iMovie had these like movie trailer templates, and I made like every template with every member of my family. That was like very much the creative expression. And then eventually it was like I could see a future where if I make enough videos for $250 or like whatever the price is, I don't have to get a real job, which in Dothan was like
pouring cement,
4 or 5 careers. Sure, yeah, not the most exciting job pipeline. And so it was just like whatever I have to do to stick the landing, making videos seemed like endlessly more exciting than whatever like career paths they were telling us in school.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I wanted to highlight that is I feel like a lot of times creatives struggle with the commercial aspect of making art. Like at least for me in my experience, that's been an inhibitor. That like I do this for fun, and it's this beautiful art thing that I do, and it feels like I'm almost like adulterating it by charging money for it. It seems like you didn't ever really wrestle with that. You kind of saw the path of like kind of doing a little bit of both.
Accidentally. Okay. So there was this weird shift that happened around 9th grade where I kind of felt like there was a basically like a time bomb that was going off my senior year where either like I make this career viable or I've got to like go to college and like do the regular thing. Yeah. And I think I sort of obsessed to an unhealthy degree the commercial part of the craft. Yeah. To the point where like it was just one day I woke up and realized I haven't made a project for fun in 6 months. And this like process that I found like eventually in high school, and I'm happy to share the path from like pageant videos to like regular videos, where the process had become sort of mechanical and there was not that like sparkle in the eye or excitement or like, I remember when I was making videos in middle school, like I couldn't wait to export it and show my family because of how like proud I was of this thing. And I sort of lost that very slowly. It wasn't like an overnight decision, but just like a moment of waking up and realizing I sort of lost the joy of creating in sake of commercializing this like otherwise very pure endeavor that started as just like something really fun that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be middle of high school, maybe?
No, that was probably towards the end of high school.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like a very slow 4-year decline of passion projects and like a very aggressive pursuit of trying to make this business thing work. And I had joined this organization called Future Business Leaders of America that has like student programs for how to like tie a tie and like write an email and these like very like structured lanes of like being a business leader.
Right.
And through that, there were like even travel opportunities. If you like run for certain offices, they like send you to conferences and sort of like just jumping from one vine to the next of trying to make this business thing work. Woke up one day and realized I'm in a very different spot than when I started this. Yeah. And it wasn't even like a overnight switch to go back to making films I really enjoyed. It was like a very intentional, honestly, like multi-year process to get back to a point where I felt like I'm doing this because I actually love it and not because it pays the bills and not because it's like a mechanical process I can paste and repeat.
Yeah. What sort of videos were you doing that you were getting paid for?
Yeah. I think it's important to talk about my entry into like the small business community to give you an idea of who was hiring me for these projects. Yeah. In 9th grade, I was still wrestling with how to get out of the pageant video cycle. Right. And there was a video competition flyer going around sponsored by Alpha Insurance. And it was a prompt to make a video about the importance of agriculture with a $500 cash prize.
Do you know who owned that agency?
No clue.
Okay. Because my friend Shelly I can't remember the town she's from, but it's a small town down there, and her dad does farm insurance.
No way.
And I don't know if it's with Alpha, but I was wondering.
Interesting.
I just keep hearing things that I keep thinking of Shelly.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it could be.
it's funny.
And I was like, I didn't know you could just like compete in a video competition.
Yeah.
And I was like very excited about the prospect of like, I can get some money for a gear without making another pageant farewell video.
Right. Yeah.
And so I competed and won first place in the state, which is the first time that anybody in my county had won that competition. And so we had a local career tech director, his name was Mr. Glenn Malloy, who reached out and asked if he could play my video at the local Rotary clubs and have me talk about like the inspiration behind the script. And I had like interviewed several farmers in the area, and they felt like it was something that there was like a sense of pride in the local agricultural community. And so I thought this was a great way to check out of school early and like go get a nice lunch somewhere. And so I just showed up and talked about this video and played it. And then after, I had all of these like agricultural and small business owners approach me asking for a business card to promote their like farm or small business or like furniture store.
Yeah.
And that was how I first started doing like commercial work.
Yeah. So the business cards did pan out.
Yeah, exactly. They did. They were like extremely dusty by the time I was handing them out, but they did get some use.
Yeah.
And the culture of video production in South Alabama is extremely tied to like return on investment.
Right.
And there's not a whole lot of social credit for like purely artistic endeavors. And so if someone was going to pay for a video, there had to be like a very clear, like, we're going to sell to this many more people. We're going to get this many people to show up to the event. And it reduced a lot of the margin for artistic expression and like experimental approaches that maybe like commercial videographers in Atlanta or Miami or New York would have. And so again, like out of just the pursuit of trying to make this career work, I was sort of conforming to the status quo of what commercial video is supposed to look like in South Alabama. And by the end of high school, I had done work for around 32 clients, but they were mostly in either the, like one was a barber, one owned a furniture store, one was the Peanut Festival, a couple of nursing homes, hospitals.
Yeah. Were those all one-off things, or were they like retainer clients to do multiple?
I had maybe 2 or 3 clients that I consider like super connectors, and they were both like repeat clients and like the best ambassadors I could have had for like referring me to one of their peers in the business space.
Yeah.
And then just a number of one-off projects that I majorly screwed up because like I really didn't know what I was doing. There was not like any film school experience or even like professional development.
Yeah.
So there were so many times where I like had a hard drive crash, or I just like communicated very poorly and lost a lot of business like strictly because I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
But thankfully that happened when I was in high school and like my parents were paying the bills, and not when I'm a starving artist and trying to make it with like real world responsibilities in adulthood.
Talk me through the briefly through the process of like, you get your first camera, you start learning. How did you learn how to use gear?
Yeah.
Because you said no film school, and also I would assume no film school when you're like 14.
Right. Yeah. A lot of YouTube. I was subscribed to like 60 different YouTube channels on like how to use a DSLR and how to use Final Cut Pro and like tips and tricks in this editor or that editor.
So you did upgrade from iMovie?
I did. Yeah. And I have to say, I was extremely blessed to have the family that I did, because even as like laughable as a video business in Dothan is, my family was very supportive.
Yeah.
And they took me seriously, and like my mother held me accountable when like I wasn't emailing people on time or like wasn't like dressing really professionally. Cool. Yeah. I owe everything to my mother and like the support system she gave me growing up. And it wasn't just emotional support. Like there was a day I was so excited I spent all of the money I had in my bank account on a drone and crashed it in the woods a month later. And I had a number of projects lined up that were like basically because I had a drone to film it, and my family like pooled their money together to get me a replacement drone so that my business would survive. Wow. And if they hadn't done that, I don't think I would have gotten any of the rest of the business in high school, which built a portfolio that took me to New York, which like launched all of my dreams. Yeah. And so I have to be very conscious of the fact that like, yes, I was like working a lot and watching a lot of videos, but I had the best support system maybe of all time, and a family that like picked up the slack when I dropped the ball, which was several times throughout childhood.
Yeah. That's so awesome. So when do you get your first camera?
Okay, so I upgraded from an iPod Touch to an iPad Mini.
Yeah.
First.
Uh-huh.
And I thought this was like a major upgrade for like not having a 3.5-inch screen for the editing, but the camera was like maybe actually worse.
I was going to say probably worse. Yeah.
And then from that, I got my grandma's hand-me-down point and shoot Canon. It was like a GX60 or something from like 2004.
Yeah.
Which she gave me for Christmas. I didn't have to pay for that.
Yeah.
And then I used that camera to do enough projects to get a Canon T5i with like a kit 18 to 55 millimeter lens. And that took me all the way to like 11th grade. Mm-hmm. And then in 11th grade, I got a Canon 80D and shot pretty much everything on this like $150 50 millimeter lens. And that same Canon 80D is what I shot my first year of projects for Baccarat in New York City with before I got a cinema camera.
Yeah.
And this is like such a point of friction with a lot of young creatives of like feeling like you have to have better gear to live up to a certain standard, and like restraint really does breed creativity.
Yeah.
And like the biggest advice I could ever give to somebody starting out is like, it really doesn't matter what camera you had, because I had like the cheapest Canon camera possible for like many years. Yeah. And that's what was the launch pad for like up until like years 6 or 7 of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that point, because there are a lot of people who make a lot of money in media and they use iPhones.
Especially now. It's like going even like further that way nowadays,
back.
where there's multimillionaires that have not used anything other than an iPhone. Yeah. They're content creators full time.
And I think
it's pretty cool. Actually.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's funny because I don't want to devalue cinematography, but I don't want that to be the excuse for people.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I think that you can go kind of two different ways, and a lot of the people who are doing the iPhone thing, it's more about messaging and maybe storytelling and that kind of stuff, and less about the cinematography.
Right.
But you can go the other way and dive headfirst into cinematography, and that's also like fantastic and amazing. But just start with an iPhone. I filmed this podcast on an iPhone.
Exactly.
So, okay, get to the end of high school.
Yeah.
Are you making enough money to like self-sustain at that point, or what is
not really?
Okay.
Yeah, I may be making like $35K a year.
Okay. I mean,
so like
in
I
Dothan,
could support myself
go
for sure.
All right.
Yeah, it would go. I had a dream of moving to New York City, and that would probably not sustain a life in New York.
No.
But somewhere like I would think like right around Thanksgiving of my senior year, there was just like a crazy set of circumstances that happened where I was making videos for my aunt, who was an abstract artist. Cool. And wanting to build an Instagram about like her craft and intention. And I was like pretty much her primary content creator. And I was creating all this media that she was posting. And one of the pictures that she posted that I shot got a comment from this guy who worked in the fashion industry in New York City.
Wow.
And I was like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And I asked Laura, the artist, I was like, do you know this person? And she was like, yeah, we used to party back in Tuscaloosa in the 80s.
Wow.
And both went to the University of Alabama.
Yeah.
And so I sent this guy a DM. It was like a shot in the dark saying like, hey, I made that content that you commented on. Just want to let you know I'm like an up and coming filmmaker with a big dream of moving to New York. If you have any work whatsoever, please let me know. And he DM'd me back. It was like, do you want to get on a call?
Yeah.
And so we scheduled a phone call the next week. It was like 4:00 Central when I got out of school. And I remember that whole day, like my heart was racing because I thought this was like my one shot at the big leagues. And like, I'll probably never get another phone call. I don't think I'd ever even like texted somebody from New York City before. Yeah. Maybe like Virginia was the furthest north that I had ever like actually known a person. And, I remember like splashing water on my face and like listening to Drake to like get in the headspace of like, all right, this is your one shot. Do not blow it. And we got on the phone and I was like a complete nervous wreck. And he was like the nicest guy ever. And we ended up talking for like an hour about like dreams, ambitions. He resonated because he grew up in the Deep South and took an internship at Ralph Lauren out of college and didn't know anybody, and just like one foot in front of the other built a life there and ended up having a pretty fantastic career in fashion in Manhattan. And at the end of the call, he was like, do you want an internship this summer? And I was like, that would be amazing. And at the time, he had just left Hugo Boss, and he was now running marketing at Baccarat, which is a French crystal house, luxury house that makes perfume, chandeliers, barware, etc., which I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
we had like red Solo cups and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the idea of like a crystal glass was like kind of just out of touch.
Yeah.
And he said, I realize young people don't really care about new crystal. That's like something that sits in your grandmother's cupboard and collects dust. People are worried about like what iPhone is coming out or like what clothes Supreme is dropping.
Right.
And he said, I took this job as a challenge to try to like reinsert this 250-year-old brand into the culture of young people and like land articles and hype beast. And so he was leveraging his fashion network with people like Martha Stewart or Louis Vuitton or the Rolling Stones or Supreme, and had them use their design language in the medium of crystal, and said he's looking for young people with an eye for media that resonates with Gen Z to portray these collaborations in a way that would bring the cult followings of all of these like very relevant brands over to Baccarat. And that's sort of like the precipice of what brought me into that role, to sort of like study from and support the effort too. So senior year of high school, I take an internship. It's for $19 an hour. There's a
rolling in it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's really no apartment that I could find. And so I find like this dorm share opportunity with these NYU dorms in Chinatown, and sign a lease for this like 300 square foot dorm in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And I'm like starting to pack my bags in February. I'm like sort of losing my mind that this is about to happen.
This is like, so you're going to graduate and then
I'm going to
go
graduate high school
Okay.
in South Alabama, and then the next week move to New York City.
Crazy.
And February 2020 hits.
Oh.
And this is my senior
I didn't
year of
do
high
the
school.
math. That's crazy.
And
Dang.
New York shuts down.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world shuts down. And I'm thinking this is going to be like a month or a month and a half.
Yeah. We all did.
A month and a half later, I get
3
an
weeks,
email.
I think.
Yeah, we thought it was like an extra long spring break.
Yeah.
And I get an email in April from Baccarat saying that they have a hiring freeze and everyone's working remote, so they terminated my offer.
Dang. That's a huge
And
letdown.
I was pretty crushed.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like the world just like stayed asleep for a year.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what I was doing with my life. I had a really bad ACT score. Like I don't even think like a public institution would have taken me.
Yeah.
Because I just like really was not applying myself in school.
Yeah. You were banking on going to New
I
York
was
for
banking
$19 an hour.
Yeah, that's my like really wise scheme to get rich in New York.
Yeah.
And I had my grandmother on my dad's side had started putting like a few like some sort of like monthly payments aside since I was born to get me 2 years at community college and 2 years at a 4-year.
Okay.
And I was actually born in Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay.
And I moved to Dothan when I was like 3 or 4 or something. And so the policy said that if I opted in, I could go to any community college in Florida and just like pay for books and some like other fees. And my whole family thought like, if I just do this video thing, there's not much of a safety net. And like, I really needed a degree under my belt.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at community colleges in Florida and like wanted to move to a big city to try to like meet other filmmakers and like swim in deeper waters and just like absorb the energy that's in metro areas that's sort of hard to find outside of the internet in a place like Dothan. And I had an aunt that ran a tennis club in Miami, and she had a spare bedroom. And I called her, we made a deal where if I coached tennis for free, she would let me stay in the spare bedroom.
Okay.
And I enrolled in community college in Miami, Florida.
Yeah. Did you play tennis before?
I did a little
Okay,
bit.
okay.
Yeah. But I was coaching like the 6 to 10 year olds. So
Yeah.
the bar was pretty low.
Okay,
Because we're like
got it.
nobody going to the US Open.
Right.
And so a couple months later, I like packed my car to the gills, and instead of going to New York, I drive to Miami to go to community college.
Okay.
And it was like a pretty lonely first year.
Yeah.
I obviously didn't know anybody in Miami outside of my aunt. My friends were these like 9 or 10-year-old students of mine that mostly spoke Spanish.
Uh-huh.
And Baccarat like didn't reach back out to give me a job. And so it was like a year of very much questioning, like, what am I really doing? I felt like I had lost a lot of the momentum I built in high school.
Yeah.
And one day I just like reached back out to Ward, the guy who originally offered me a job at Baccarat. I said, hey, is there any chance New York is back open and I could get that internship this summer. And he was like, let me talk to HR and see if the hiring freeze is lifted. And they ended up reoffering me the same position that I had my senior year. So I finished my first year at Miami-Dade College, moved to New York City, and my first day on the job, we're shooting a project for Chance the Rapper and Grace Weber at the Baccarat Hotel on 53rd Street.
That's crazy.
And I was like thrusted into this world that was extremely foreign that I had like no reference points to. And at this point, I was just doing like behind the scenes internal content. They didn't really trust like my Peanut Festival portfolio to translate well into like ads for their Instagram with like 400,000 followers.
Yeah.
And so I was just very much like a fly on the wall and trying to absorb as much as I could from the environment.
Before you go further, did you film much in Miami for that year?
Not really. I filmed a lot of personal projects, but the business community had a lot more qualified people than like me, who was 18 with this like South Alabama portfolio. And so outside of personal projects, I really didn't have any momentum with the business that year.
Okay. So back to New York.
Did not contribute well to my crisis of purpose.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't help at all.
And so I show up at Baccarat and I really only have a summer internship. It's not even a job. And I have like one summer to like somehow try to make it or whatever.
Prove yourself.
Prove myself. Yeah. And I had one big summer project. And that was that there was a global team working on this company. The HQ is in Europe. There's a North American subsidiary, an Asian Pacific subsidiary. But almost no one in the company really knew the history of the brand. They knew like the first 15 years and the last 20 years and then like the 230 years in between there were just a big question mark. And so they laid a 400-page book in front of me that documented like every part of the history of the company and said, make a short film to train the company on what this on what this brand has done for the last 2 centuries.
Yeah.
And so like right away I start like flipping through this book and making notes, and like on my apartment wall I had it almost looked like I was like solving a murder, like all these like pictures of like different like princes of India ordering like this chandelier and then like this family bringing it to the Americas, and really immersed myself in this like pretty crazy 250-year story of Baccarat. And there were parts of it that felt like fiction. It was for the first 200 years known as the Crystal of the Kings. So it was sort of a status for your royal family to have their own collection of Baccarat, which was sort of synonymous with like the highest level of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And there were stories of like the Maharaja of India wanting the world's largest chandelier, getting it made for 2 years, shipped to his palace, and when they hung it, the ceiling collapsed. And so he ordered another one.
That's crazy.
And they spent like another 4 years, made everything by, this is like pre-industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And then tested the rigidity of the palace by hoisting an elephant onto the roof. And there's like actual pictures of this, or like paintings that are like in museums in the Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul today.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with this crazy history and also worldview that was so far from what I grew up knowing in South Alabama, where like China is this like scary place and Europe is this like, you know, old fashioned continent that's like a world away and nobody like really goes there. I kind of thought like Atlanta and Texas were like the two ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And
they are,
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. From Birmingham for sure. And realized that like America is this like very new part in this much grander tapestry of history that I was like pretty much unaware of. Again, I was not applying myself.
I mean, this company is older than the country.
Older than the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so not only did I learn a lot about the company, and had like a big challenge to rise to like put a short film together, not about like your year is Miss Peanut or like whatever small business, but like this like global brand. But I became fascinated by the world beyond what I knew. And I had such a deep longing to explore these places that I had read extensively about at that point. And I made a 12-minute short film that ended up being a great success. And they played it at the Maison in Paris, and they sent it to their team in Tokyo. And that was the project that won the favor of leadership to then start allowing me to do public facing projects and spearhead the creative direction of how they were going to create media for these activations that were supposed to bring them into Hypebeast and the culture. And so I got to contribute to projects with Virgil Abloh, Supreme, Chrome Hearts, Martha Stewart, the Kentucky Derby, the Pegasus World Cup, I eventually went back to community college and started commuting like back and forth to New York. And I like, kept my office at HQ, and I was like a student by day. And then I would like fly to New York for the weekend and film like Tyler Cameron for the New York Fashion Week, and then back to school. And then that next January, their like big North American sponsorship was of the Pegasus World Cup, which was sort of like emerging as like the new Kentucky Derby, and briefly had like the world's largest purse. And made my first national commercial that January that played on NBC across the US, and they distributed in certain markets in Europe.
Wow.
Which then caught the eye of other brands in New York as well as in Miami. And I started branching out and did work for Anheuser-Busch, Grand Marnier, Royal Caribbean.
So at that point, you're not full-time at Baccarat?
I'm technically full-time at Baccarat with the ability to do freelance work on the side.
Gotcha.
And about a year later, I transitioned from being on staff at Baccarat to then they would like contract me for whatever work, because I was just like on the road and doing other things too much to commit to a full-time role.
How old were you?
19.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like a very
That's
fast-paced
insane.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like about to turn 20 when I did the national commercial, and then like the network sort of like grew pretty quickly from there. And for the first time I had like money to travel and whatnot. And so I started traveling sort of like obsessively, and spent like the next 2 years, I think I covered like 32 countries.
Wow.
And averaged like 70 to 80 flights a year, and was delivering maybe like 10 to 12 projects per month.
Wow.
And even though this was a period of a lot of growth, deep down I had major imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I thought like I've hit like a lot of lucky streaks, and at some point they're going to realize like me. At this point I had a Canon 5D Mark IV, which is like people like shoot weddings with this.
Yeah.
This is not like for like campaigns that play in airports and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was really worried that they were going to like figure out that I don't belong here and I can't actually operate to the level that these like production houses do in London or Paris or Tokyo or wherever. And so I said yes to literally everything.
Yeah.
And I was like pulling all-nighters like twice a week to get the work done. And I was on these long haul flights where I would just like either pass out and sit still, or I was like working the whole time. My diet was really poor. And right after I turned 20, I was 3 days out from going to Southeast Asia, packing my bags, leaving a dinner in Miami, and I had a stroke. The right half a mini stroke, a TIA is what they call it. But the right half of my body went numb, and my lips started drooping down, and I went to the hospital. And the doctors were like, "You've got to cancel everything. We need to figure out what caused this." And ultimately found that I had a hole in my heart, and that they were going to have to do heart surgery to close it. And until then, I had to like pretty much like sit in Baptist Hospital of Miami and wait for heart surgery.
That's crazy.
And that was not on my bingo card for that year.
Or ever.
Ever. Yeah.
Man. I mean, screeching halt.
Screeching halt, yes. And I remember laying in the hospital bed that night, very shaken up by just like the reality of that I'm not invincible, and that like anything could happen at any point in time. And I hadn't really given a whole lot of thought to like, what am I really doing with my life? I was just like swinging from one vine to the next, like rather haphazardly, to be honest.
Yeah.
And realized had I died that night, I felt like I was given a disproportionate amount of blessings and people and opportunities. And I was having a lot of fun, and I was like starting to make some money. But all I cared about in life was like making money and sneaking into whatever influencer party, and like basically like chasing ego. And there was no regard for like paying any of these opportunities forward in any way. And certainly no regard for like bringing anybody else along that journey with me. Like I very much like, to a fault, held tightly to the creative process. Like I wasn't great at collaborating with like other peers in the creative space, and thought through like, had I died tonight, I feel like I'm living an immensely selfish life, and wish I would have done something like bigger than myself. Or done something to like in some way pay that forward, so that my story in South Alabama is not an anomaly, and like the other kids that don't have the same family, or like don't look the same as me, or like don't move into the neighbor that like happens to introduce them to their like passion, can actually like get a start doing what they love, and like call their work their passion, and not just what pays the bills. And I Grew up in a Southern Baptist church and like very much considered myself a Christian in high school, and then realized like as I moved away, my faith was very much like wrapped up in the people around me as opposed to like something that I was like actively watering myself.
Yeah.
And in these couple of years, I was like really trying to get the approval of these folks that were in like the most secular pockets of maybe like planet Earth, and realized like I hadn't prayed in like a year, and my faith was like pretty much dead. And realizing how out of control I was over my own life, sort of was like a prodigal son moment where I realized like this life is not my own, and like I was sort of like spared by God tonight to not die. So if I like make it through heart surgery and get a second chance, I'm going to do something bigger than myself. I'm not going to take these things for granted, and I'm going to make sure that like at least I do my very best to give more to the world than I have taken from it.
Yeah. Before you go further, through that process of like wild all over the world, what did your family think?
Well, my immediate family was very concerned that I was going to get killed.
Yeah.
At like every stop along the way.
Yeah.
Because I was usually traveling solo, and the furthest they had traveled was like California.
Right.
And
Where were you just like, I mean, Australia, Indonesia, Japan?
Yeah. So in those couple of years, it was 5 continents and like 32 countries. And then eventually I thankfully recovered from heart surgery, and it's like sort of a long journey before I found what I actually wanted to do. But in the 2 years after that, spent a good bit of time in the Far East and like central China by myself, and Antarctica and northern Africa and Egypt. And every time my family would like hug me very tightly and was like, sure, this was like a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And I think like Americans sort of blow the actual risk out of proportion just
100%.
due to like the ocean that insulates us from the reality of those places, and the Western media that doesn't help with like the fear mongering of other countries.
I've been to some countries, like I went to Ukraine.
Yeah, no way.
When the conflict started in like 2013.
No way.
Like we get back from Ukraine, and on TV like 2 weeks later we see statues being torn down.
That's insane.
In like plazas that we were like having dinner.
Wow.
And South Africa. I went to South Africa in 2009.
Okay.
Which is also like an incredibly
Dang.
dangerous place right now, arguably.
But rich experiences to have at a young age.
Fantastic. I went to both of those places before I turned 14.
That's amazing.
And so that like shaped my
I would love to do that with my
world
kids
perspective. Like seeing poverty in South Africa, and then seeing like actually pretty normal life in Ukraine, in a place that's like definitely corrupt. Like we saw, like driving in between big cities, like roads that have potholes as big as cars, so you drive into the field to go around them, and like people in horse and buggy, and then you get into the city and it's like Ferraris and Bentleys, like in the same, hour, 2 hour drive.
Yeah.
Like crazy that those things are like right next to each other.
Right.
But yeah, shaped my worldview like so much
a
in a
rich
good
experience.
way.
Yeah.
Like it helped me understand like a lot of people live in a lot of different ways, and like they're not bad just because they're different.
Exactly.
And also I'm so blessed that I don't live in like utter poverty.
Yes. And how beautiful to see that when you're like starting out as soft clay and like very much forming your worldview still, as opposed to like waiting till retirement to travel. 100%. And like you've already raised your kids a certain way. You've already like sort of cemented these beliefs that are core to your identity that are like, kind of hard to like deconstruct in light of a discovery elsewhere. Right. Yeah. And like huge privilege because it's obviously very expensive and like time consuming to go to another continent and like explore, but like such a valuable and
so worth it
and like educational.
Way more worth it than like, my parents could have bought me a nice car when I turned 16 or something like that, but they gave me, or even that
like
experience.
Classroom education to a degree. I feel like we overemphasize getting the right degree and not like traveling and exposing yourself to like real world experiences.
Yeah. So you have heart surgery.
Yeah.
And you have this kind of come to Jesus moment. Was it drop everything and change your life immediately? Like what happens?
No, actually
next?
nothing changed after heart surgery.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew something should change, but I had no idea what. And I had a lot of like kinetic energy sitting around for like not only the 2 weeks to get heart surgery, but then I had to stay at home for like a month after that to fully recover. That like by the time I got through that, I was like so excited to get back on the road and work, that I was like very focused on that. But I did know that like deep down, I wanted to figure out some way to like make sure that other kids from my hometown that had the same dream had a level playing field and weren't just like counted out because of geography.
Yeah.
And
so you're mostly freelance at that point.
Yeah.
Did you just have to like cancel a couple gigs and then like pick back up?
I had to cancel several gigs.
Yeah.
Thankfully, everyone was very understanding due to the circumstances. But
Yeah.
it was like probably 6 weeks of not really doing much of any work. And then very heavy back that fall on the freelance side.
Yeah.
And during this process, I was very much like thinking through how to make sure that there's like pathways for young aspiring creatives in Alabama to actually seek that out, and was also actively doing freelance work for the State Department of Commerce in Alabama. Okay. So back
while you're in New York.
Yeah, this started actually in like junior year of high school.
Wow. Okay.
The State Department of Commerce had this brand called Alabama Works, and Alabama Works had regional offices, and there was one in Dothan called Southeast Alabama Works, and they would contract me to make videos for this student career fair essentially called Worlds of Work. And that eventually led into some web design projects. There was like a pivotal talk that I watched on YouTube in 11th grade that was given by Virgil Abloh at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Yep.
And he brought this
I've seen that video.
beat up chicken noodle soup can. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And was like, what is this worth? And the crowd was like a nickel or quarter, I don't know. And he was like, if I put this on a whitewash pedestal in the MoMA, though, it's like all of a sudden a statement worth like 50K or 100K. And
yeah.
The point of the story was that he didn't approach design as like the object on the pedestal, but the room that you're presenting it in. And I realized that for most of my clients, especially in high school, I would put a lot of heart and soul into these videos that were put on these like websites from 2005 and like a logo from Microsoft Paint maybe.
Yeah.
And like 360-degree media around the video itself, very much like contradicted like the tone and the production value and whatnot of the video. And so I just like very basically started editing templates on Wix that felt like sort of on brand for the video.
Right.
And went on YouTube and was like, how to make graphic design.
Yeah.
And the first video was this like Korean woman talking about how she makes her thumbnails on YouTube. And she was like, you have to go to PicMonkey.com. And there's all these like tools in PicMonkey. And it was like a free version of Photoshop, essentially. Okay. And I got like very heavy into like the Wix website and PicMonkey graphic design workflow in tandem with videos for like certain clients that wanted like a holistic approach, which is like I was doing the wrong method and platform on like every piece of the craft.
Yeah.
But I just like didn't know any better and didn't have any like teachers that were like, hey, this is actually like the worst platform possible to like make graphic
the right business, the right business model, the right integrations, but doing all of it in the wrong way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. There's like an old saying, you have to learn the rules before you break them.
Right.
I just broke them.
Yep.
And that led to like 2 or 3 years of really poor output. But again, like the standard was not terribly high. And so it gave me sort of like a soft launching pad to make those basic mistakes. And this is like sort of embarrassing, but I think it's funny at this point. This is now like 9 years later, and I am over 10,000 graphics and designed on PicMonkey.com.
So you still use it?
Haven't left.
Wow.
It's since been acquired by Shutterstock, which makes me feel like such a fraud that I'm like going to a Shutterstock design.
Yeah.
And I have shipped designs that have been in like billboards in airports and cities around the world from PicMonkey.com.
That's crazy.
But anyways, my first client that took me up on this like 360 offering was Southeast Alabama Works.
Okay.
And we like revamped their website. We made like videos that I thought were actually cool and not these like stale corporate workforce things that everyone had seen before. And eventually the state called and asked if I could do the same thing for their statewide Alabama Works program.
Yeah.
And pretty much everything that we put a lot of creative investment into reaped a lot of growth on the engagement and like actual results of like jobs placed and people interacting with their programs. And there was a small team within the Department of Commerce that was technically in this organization called AIDT, they were huge believers in creative and were very counter to like the Alabama stereotype that like creative is something for your intern to do on Canva if they have time at the end of the day.
Right.
And we're like always open to any idea that I had. And because they were state funded, they had like pretty substantial budgets to do crazy things. And there was a very real shift mentally that happened for me when I left Alabama and eventually like through this like, long route through Miami, made it to New York, where I would pitch these ideas that I thought were cool and doable for $2,500, to which leadership would say, we don't care.
Yeah.
We want to do something that Europe hasn't tried yet. And that like pushes the envelope and like gets the tabloids talking. And there's pretty much a blank check if it actually is pushing the needle in some regard. And so I had to deconstruct this process of like, have a cool idea and then make it work for a small amount of money and just let my imagination run wild, which was like maybe the greatest gift they could have ever given me. Because for like 3 solid years after that, in a very healthy way and also like very privileged way, I was like divorced from reality and just sort of had like blank checks for any crazy ideas and sort of forgot that in Alabama, outside of this small team within the Department of Commerce I was working with, that status quo was very much still real of like creative is kind of an afterthought or peripheral and not something that deserves much capital. And I had gotten a front row seat at what the state cared about for like 4 or 5 years, depending on what project they would send me to promote or like make a video for. And I like really started to understand the growing sector in aerospace and maritime and obviously healthcare and agriculture, and realized that there was virtually no support for creatives in Alabama. And as I got back on the road from recovering from heart surgery and sort of like getting back into the normal flow of life, I realized how literally worldwide, whenever I talked about where I was from, they had the same perception of like racist people and like people kissing their cousins on like dirt roads with no power and outhouses and stuff. And literally every country that I would talk about, crazy. Alabama, we had a global PR crisis.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the last time we really made global headlines was the 1960s at the height of the civil rights movement, which like glass half empty is a scar on our history. Glass half full, it's like we like sort of were the hotbed or like led the charge for this movement that permeated worldwide. But the former very much like took seed and everyone's perception was still from like 65 years ago. And I started thinking like pretty heavily through like what long-term implication does that have, not in just like the outside world's perception, inclusion, and investment in Alabama, but also the people growing up here that hear these stories and believe that Alabama is like just a bunch of like rednecks that are uneducated and like can't do much beyond manual labor, and then set their sights so much lower for their own life and their own ambition. And I held that in one hand and also realized when I was traveling that like once you get past the initial culture shock, you realize that humans are humans in every country. And there's like maybe different ways that they dress or talk or sound. But at the core, like we all long for the same few things and we're deeply similar. And I sort of, in a very healthy way, demystified the humans in these like exotic places like Tokyo or Paris or Singapore and realized these are the same people of like the same flesh and bone that just happen to be connected to the resources and the job opportunities and the capital to like chase their wildest dreams. And so I started thinking through not only how do we change the perception of Alabama, not just for the outside world, but for people growing up to like shatter the limiting beliefs they have about like what the opportunity landscape really is. And then how do we potentially use the creative community as like a lever to turn the page from the 1960s and make sure that if there is somebody that could be like the next Steven Spielberg or like is like an amazing designer, that they pursue that career and that like whatever contribution they have to like the new narrative of Alabama doesn't go unfounded just because they like grew up in the wrong pocket of like rural South Alabama and didn't know that was a job.
I would say the other thing too is there are a lot of amazing people who do come from Alabama, but then they end up leaving.
Exactly.
So there's also the element of like, how do we hold on to those people somehow? Or 100%. Like, you know, don't scare them off.
Yes.
Because like when you find success in New York, you just stay in New York because that's where success is, you know?
And if I didn't have that stroke, I probably would still be like either in Europe or somewhere else, just like trying to get, you know, part of like the resources and piece of the pie of these established markets. And I don't know if this is the same number, but to your point, that year that I was thinking through like creatives in Alabama and like PR crisis, there was a stat that came out that said Alabama had the 4th worst brain drain in the US.
Yeah.
Meaning there were only 3 other states that exported more talent to go work elsewhere. So even though we certainly do have like equally as smart people, like you said, they go and work at like the much higher paying job in Atlanta or Nashville or Austin or SF or wherever.
Yeah. I mean, go back through the catalog of people I've interviewed, because there are some pretty world-class people, I think, here doing amazing things, or even like from Alabama writing things for the New York Times or taking photos for the New York Times, or like doing stuff like that from here. But a lot of times those people end up going other places because it's just, that's where the opportunity is, you know?
100%.
So how do you cultivate that opportunity here?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the answer overnight. This was one of those things that like started as like a seed of an idea. And then I think there was a different approach that I had to this, like, how do we support creatives in Alabama? Because it was not just for making money or like stroking the ego or like adding another brand to the portfolio. Like this was not only deeply meaningful and bigger than myself, but deeply personal, because this was like a place that I came from and like was disproportionately fortunate and aligned at like a purpose level that I had never experienced on like any other project. And so my motivation to like go hard and think about it was like 10 times higher than any other like shiny project in New York or Miami or Europe or wherever. And so the idea started literally as just like, let's add a page to alabamaworks.com for creatives. And I was dabbling in PicMonkey one day.
Yep. It all comes back.
As all do.
Yeah.
And I think I might be like one of like 7 remaining users they have on the platform. And I'm like really worried they're just gonna like shut it down.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was like playing with patterns with the Alabama Works logo, which was this like abstract A situation. And if you mirror it underneath, it looks like a portal in like a cool futuristic way.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if we made that like the brand mark for this program for creatives and called it the Creative Portal? Where it was like literally a portal, like a website, but also like a portal. And it's like an Alabama that's like disconnected in a cool way from what we currently see as like the opportunities for creatives. And I pitched them in December of 2023 on like a very small project, like adding a page to the website and calling it the Creative Portal. And they're like, we love this, but we're breaking for Christmas like next week. And I learned like the government does no work from like 4 months before Christmas, like 4 months after Christmas. And so they were like, let's circle back in the new year. And so the whole like long period of their Christmas recess, I was obsessing over like, how do we like build real resources for creatives that like could go to this website and like figure out either like a training program or like, I wanted to have like the companies that had like jobs in in-house design or whatever it may be. And I thought, like, we can't just build a web page and expect people to find it. Like, we need an ad campaign saying, welcome Alabama filmmakers, welcome Alabama music producers, welcome Alabama web developers. And obviously, like, Alabama is not so culturally minded, but more like commercially minded. And I was trying to think of, like, how do we connect this to what they really do care about? And in 2023, this was, like, post-pandemic, but very much still like early stages for a lot of people, like pre-generative AI. And this was a window of time where it felt like society was exponentially moving operations into the digital realm. Like more students were studying online, more jobs were going remote. Some jobs like didn't even go back to the office. And people were scrolling and like consuming digital real estate at a higher rate than ever before. And it seemed like Alabama wasn't playing any meaningful role in how this digital world was being built. And we were sort of pigeonholed to whatever products were coming out of San Francisco or Chicago or New York. And like reading the writing on the wall, it felt like we were really missing out on like a key part of like modernizing our workforce and like playing a role, not just in like the deep South's economy, but like being part of the national conversation for once. And the idea of like Alabama not being an underdog and like respected and like considered and looked up to in the same ways that like Texas or California or Virginia or New York was extremely energizing to me. And so these creative disciplines that we were trying to equip were like part cultural, but also like part commercial, like the people that were creating websites, creating apps. And so I outlined a 5-part ad campaign that targeted 5 different disciplines to bring them to the Creative Portal. And they were like, we love this idea so much, but there was just legislation passed that said that any projects over a certain dollar amount, we have to do what's called an RFP process for. So they would send out a request for proposals, and then anybody could bid on doing that project, so that there wasn't like a monopoly on state contracts.
Yeah.
And so they were like,
we'll take your idea and then we'll go
like
get
a little
bids
bit
for it.
uncomfortable to like give them this idea that I was like deeply personally energized by
Yeah.
and have like anybody bid on it. But I was like, if this is what it takes to do it, like I wanted to like remove myself.
You care more about the idea than you yourself.
Yeah, I was like, even if the
one
idea
doing
gets built, that's still a win.
it. Yeah.
And so I was expecting like the next week to get a link to like send in the proposal, and it took them 4 months to send the link to submit the proposal.
Yeah.
Which ended up being a huge blessing in disguise.
Okay.
Because for 4 months, day and night, I went to bed thinking about like, how do we build real programs for creatives and
Yeah.
like cultivate a world-class creative economy in Alabama.
Yeah.
And I still was very much disconnected from the reality of like funding in Alabama, and forgot about the like sort of low ceiling of funding for creative projects, and was approaching this as if I was approaching Baccarat with an ad campaign.
Right.
And I sort of like allowed my mind to run wild and thought like, this doesn't need to be a web page. It needs to be like its own program. And like, instead of under the umbrella of Alabama Works, like a sister organization that's dedicated to like being connective tissue for all the local programs that exist across the state. And also has its own funding structure so that it's not just like a piece of a program that's, you know, not really focused on creatives.
Yeah.
And I came up with this $500,000 pilot program called Alabama Creates, which I didn't think was that crazy at the time, because like I was very much
New
removed
York
from
money,
reality.
$500,000, nothing.
Sure. Yeah. And so I finally get the link, and I have like pages and pages of these like ideas that I've been writing down. I think at that point it started like in my notes app before it got into a proposal, and I was at like 75 or 76 ideas for things that like I wanted to include in this. And they said the only way to submit the proposal is via mail. So I went to
that is such an
Staples.
Alabama government thing.
Yeah. So I went to Staples and I printed this like 50-page deck and went to the post office and was like, please get this to Montgomery.
Yeah.
I really need it to arrive in one piece. And I left this $500,000 proposal with this lady at the desk at the post office, and then like went home. And they have this clause where like, if you're bidding for a project, you can't really communicate with the people reviewing it because they don't want you to sway the judging committee. So it wasn't like I could check and see like, hey, are you guys cool if I propose like a 40x budget from what we talked about in January?
Yeah.
Or like, have you received the binder?
Yeah.
And I just like went home and like waited. And a couple weeks go by and it's crickets.
Are you still in New York at that point?
No, at this point I'm splitting my time between Miami and New York.
Okay.
And sort of a nomad. So like 6 months out of the year, I'm just like on the road.
Okay.
And so I had the stroke in May of 2023. And then this was in, May of 2022. And this was in the spring of 2023.
Okay.
And so I had like very much gone back to my old life, and like I was hopeful for this project, but I was focused on like, you know, filming for whoever was giving me opportunities at the time. And I wait like 2 months and I don't hear anything from Commerce. And so I start to like just give up on it and think I probably saw this and laughed it right off the boardroom table.
Yeah.
And it's at the end of summer of 2023. And I get an email from this person I've never heard of at the Department of Commerce and their purchasing department, which is like, I don't even know what a purchasing department is.
Yeah.
Crazy to have a department just for like buying things.
Yeah, right.
And he said, he like approached me as this like old person. He's like, Mr. Rickard, we have reviewed her proposal extensively and have approved it with no questions asked.
Wow.
And I was like floored.
That's crazy.
I was taken aback.
Yeah.
And I was endlessly energized by the idea of like pouring myself into this project. And by the way, that had a 3-year time frame attached to it. So we had like a year to build the thing and then 2 years to oversee it. And I was connected to this project in a way that I had really never felt to like whatever commercial that we had shot before. And there was still no clause that said I had to like move to Alabama to do this. I thought this was going to be a big part of my focus and something I would like fly for a few weeks a quarter to do to like make sure we were filming the right things. But it felt like kind of suicidal to just like fully give up on this clientele that I had worked for like a decade at that point to build elsewhere. And I had like grown accustomed to like a pretty like metropolitan life and like being connected to those kinds of communities. And the idea of moving to Alabama felt like kind of crazy and honestly like scary at that point. So that wasn't like part of my psyche. And they said, we know that we're going to start this in October, but we have our annual workforce conference coming up in September. Can you come to a talk to like announce what we're going to build? And I was like, sure. So I flew to Montgomery for like 24 hours and I'm expecting this talk to have like maybe 30 people. Cause in the workforce community, they're worried about like shipbuilding and like cyber and
the port over
defense.
there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm expecting this to be like an empty audience. And I have like my 45-minute talk about like programs for creatives. And I walk in and it's a packed audience of like 350 people.
Wow.
And this, it's like the Renaissance in Montgomery or something. And I give the talk and at the end we have 15 minutes for Q&A. And we have to stop questions at 40 minutes because of how many folks were like excited about creatives having support and wanting to connect with this in their like local community in some way.
Yeah.
And I got off stage and before I got out of the door of the ballroom, I had like maybe 30 business cards of people that like wanted to follow up and support this however they could.
Wow.
And was genuinely astounded by the excitement and support for creatives in Alabama.
Yeah.
And these business cards were of like people that I had never heard of before. And I realized my view of Alabama was very much still rooted in high school, where like I had like gone to a conference in Montgomery or Birmingham before, but I didn't really like know those communities. And I realized that there was actually a lot more than what I thought existed in like many corners of the state.
Yeah.
And that if I am going to do this right and actually like be connective tissue, there's no way I can do it from a Zoom screen in Miami.
Yeah.
And that night in the hotel room, I started thinking through like, what if I moved back to Alabama?
Wow.
This place that I like very much tried to escape
Yeah,
from.
I kind of didn't ever want to come back.
And then like stuck the landing. Like it was like a bizarrely fast time frame from like having these dreams in 11th grade to like sort of like working with the people I had dreamed of working with like two or 3 years later and feeling like I'd won the lottery in a very real way.
Yeah.
And there was like the ego in me was like, oh, you're like throwing this away by like moving back to Alabama and like they're probably not going to call you back. And like, you probably like won't have another bridge back to, you know, New York or like whatever it is. And of course, like all the insecurities and like ego cropped up. But when I reconnected back to like this very vivid, like almost out of body experience I had when I was waiting for a heart surgery, I realized all of that just doesn't matter. And the idea of getting this right and contributing to an Alabama that welcomes and celebrates and values creatives meant more than any like accolade or brand or project I could sign in my lifetime.
Wow.
And so I spent the next 2 months like emailing all my clients saying I'm moving back to Alabama and I'm like probably not going to have time until 2030.
Wow.
And moved to Birmingham because I figured if we're trying to boil the ocean, like the water in Birmingham is already like 150 degrees. There's like a ton of creatives doing great stuff here. And that I could probably like be most connected to like the folks that really know the challenges and like friction points of the ecosystem being in Birmingham. And also it's like the most metropolitan pocket of the state that we have.
Yeah.
So it felt like
The most city that
there's
you
like
could
some
get.
like construction noise and like some buses that like made me feel very at home, even though I grew up in like peanut fields and in a very different setting. And I moved in January. We had a year to build Alabama Creates, this like website with all these career exploration tools, ad campaigns that showcase folks across the state working across disciplines, institutional partnerships that we could send people to Montevallo or UAB or Auburn or like wherever had programs in their program of interest, in their area of interest. We had this idea of the creative portal being like a social platform that's part of the Alabama Creates brand where like creatives can find each other in rural zip codes through Discord servers in like the early phase and like all these like crazy ideas.
Yeah.
And every ask that I made of commerce was met with a yes.
Wow.
For like 2 years.
That's nuts.
From like the idea's inception to like me moving to Birmingham. And I was like, what if we're launching this on January 1st, what if we do a New Year's Eve drone light show of the Birmingham skyline that says Alabama Creates and turns into a QR code you can scan in the sky to win MacBook Pros. And they were like, get the proposal from Texas.
That's nuts.
And I was like, what if we debut the program publicly at South by Southwest on the main stage for the international creative community? And they were like, send in the application.
That's crazy.
And it was like literal rocket fuel.
Yeah.
I did not recognize the state that I came back to in like the most refreshing way possible.
Yeah.
Because like my imagination was met with like nothing but emphatic support.
Wow.
And it was like rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And like maybe the most like euphoric 4 or 5 months of my life of just like doing the most meaningful work ever, feeling creatively challenged across like all dimensions, like as like a content creator, as like a communicator to other people. I was like learning how to like leverage these institutional systems that was like, I like didn't go to business school, and like, you know, I did like Future Business Leaders of America, which is like this high school organization, but that was like my only reference.
You learned how to tie a tie, or
learned how to tie a tie and like
write a letter.
Write a letter and sign my name. And 4 months in, there's a bill introduced at the state to merge the Department of Commerce with the Department of Labor and create a new Department of Workforce, which seemed really exciting at first, that we were going to have like a complete ecosystem just for workforce programs, but it also meant that there was likely going to be a change in leadership.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had a unicorn of a team in Montgomery behind this that saw the value in creative. We've been working together for like 6 years at this point on different creative projects that brought a lot of people to their programs and like folks onto the websites and things like that. And what ultimately happened is the departments merged. The interim director said that he can't connect the creative economy to our existing economic goals. And 5 months before launch, shut down the program.
Brutal.
And I was pretty crushed.
Yeah. Had you moved yet?
Yeah, I'd been here for like 6 months at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And
when did we meet?
We met several months after it had collapsed.
Okay.
This was I think we met in the spring of 2025.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And I had sort of a crisis of purpose where like the calls had definitely dried up from elsewhere. I was doing like some remote work still for Baccarat, and then I also had a long-term relationship with Moleskine at that point. It makes like notebooks and pens, and those are my two sort of like connections. Hey, shout out Moleskine. Yeah, big fan of the brand.
Yeah.
And outside of that, like I had just like stopped getting emails because I told them I was busy, and felt like there was not really a easy way to like go back to that life. And I also felt like I had just poured my heart and soul into this thing that never saw the light of day for like, at that point, like mentally a year and a half, even though we had just started that year, just like throwing away.
Yeah.
And the idea that like by a stroke of a pen from this guy I've never met, who like probably doesn't even really know what we're up to in Montgomery, eliminating support for creatives, or like at least like whatever support you were going to give through the program, just like frustrated me to like a level I can't even express.
Brutal.
And I essentially thought, I'm either going to bring this program back or go down swinging. And went on this like 1 year quest to somehow find another department to revive Alabama Creates through. And it's like a long, like fairly messy story, to be honest. And like, sadly, like some bridges were burned in the process. I like had a lot of meetings that I was not authorized to have just because I thought like I have nothing else to lose, and ultimately culminated in nothing. At a certain point, I realized if I can't do the statewide top down approach, I wanted to at least start in a small community to show how many young people were passionate about creative careers, and two, the impact that has on like the rest of the community and economy to like have really great creatives and in the environment. And I thought through all of like the very real, just like lottery tickets and blessings I had growing up, like being near a neighbor that introduced me to my passion, and like having a family that was very supportive, having a family like help replace equipment when I needed equipment, and like these people that took me under the wing to teach business, and like very real hurdles that most of my peers just didn't have the support system to overcome.
Yeah.
And thought through like, how do we surface the cream of the crop talent and then knock down all those barriers for them? And so I came up with this idea called the Film Exchange, where students compete and create films in exchange for all the equipment that they would need to start a freelance video business, training, and the opportunity to build a portfolio to actually pitch themselves. And I priced out like the entry level equipment for like a laptop, camera, mic, tripod, and figured I could buy 7 creator kits for $15K. And I went to this economic development meeting in Dothan, my hometown, and pitched this idea and basically told the room, I need $15,000 to buy equipment and show not only like this community, but the state, what young people can do as like freelance filmmakers.
Yeah.
And it was crickets.
Man.
That's nobody
crazy.
Really
in like a room full of business owners.
Yeah. They just couldn't really connect like spending $15,000 on video equipment that just like didn't really click. But something that was like a bit of a full circle moment was my first ever video competition that was sponsored by Alpha Insurance. They played it at the Dothan Civic Center when I was in 9th grade.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman that came forward who gave me my certificate, who was the mayor at the time, Mayor Mike Schmitz, who owned like 3 or 4 car dealerships in Dothan. And I felt like quite special in that moment, like meeting the mayor and like getting the certificate from him, and hadn't seen him in many years. And it turns out he was in that room that I was pitching this idea to all these years later, and came up to me afterwards in private and said, whatever you need, I will fund.
Holy cow.
When can you come to the dealership?
That's crazy.
So I drove to this car dealership, and an hour later he cut me a check for $15,000.
Wow.
And that seeded our first ever film exchange program.
Wow.
We had a hype video competition just to like get anybody and their brother to make videos. We picked 7 students, gave them this like 2-day boot camp and equipment, and like sent them out to like actual real world clients that were nonprofits with no creative budget to get like the business and entrepreneurial muscle working. And fast forward a year, one of those students built like an outdoor recreation Instagram platform that got over 4 million views.
Wow.
One student got their first pair of dress shoes and professional attire and started a like actual media business after. One student used the projects they created in the program to apply for a scholarship and got a full ride to Auburn University.
Wow.
And this was out of a cohort of just 7 students in rural Southeast Alabama.
That's crazy.
And I knew that there were a lot more students like that across the state. So like throughout the whole process of trying to get approval from some state agency, I was like, let me focus on like a very local effort and scale this and use the actual success stories as the metrics for why this should exist, not just like them taking my word for it. And so fast forward a year and a half later, we ran 3 cycles of this film exchange program. Actually brought on one of the alumni from the first cohort, whose name is Will Smith, which is pretty great. Who called me like a year later and was like, I started a film festival at my high school and I want to scale it. How can I do that? And I was like, why don't we join forces? And Will Smith became the first ever hire of the film exchange to take the same program that he went through across the state.
Fantastic.
We found this.
Well done, Will.
Yeah, well done, Will, who's right behind the camera. He's the glue of this program and why it is successful.
Yeah.
And we ironed out this model that like expanded the training from 2 days to the entire spring semester. And instead of just doing one work-based learning project, they would do 4.
Okay.
And we would sell these ads they were creating for $750 to the local business community. And so if a student created 4 of those throughout the project, it paid off that equipment for the next seat in the following cohort to create a self-sustaining model.
Wow.
During this process, we had real metrics for jobs created, organizations that got their first piece of creative media that were able to like get more traction on fundraising or talent recruitment, and use this case study in grant applications statewide. And instead of trying to go back to like the government and get permission from some department to build this, I just thought, why don't we like build it from the grassroots up? And about 60 meetings and a year and 4 months after Alabama Creates was shut down, we got a $250,000 grant for a full year of operating expenses to finish what we started and launch the program.
Wow.
And I'm excited to say that in 2 weeks from this Friday, we publicly launch Alabama Creates.
That's amazing.
And the film exchange.
What's the official date?
May 29th, 2026. And I don't know when this is posting, but we're doing a rave at Sloss Furnaces with the creative community to commemorate the launch of this program that will hopefully build bridges across the state.
Yeah.
And the Film Exchange is now our flagship youth support program that is scaling statewide by 2030.
Wow. That's crazy.
Glory to God.
Yeah, praise God. What a wild roller coaster.
Smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor.
Yeah. Good word. Man, I'm wondering. I think we should stop there.
Beautiful.
I think that's great. I want to have another conversation with you at some point, and I would love to maybe check in and see how this is going.
Yeah.
And also talk about, I I think there's a balance that I'm wondering about. How do you cultivate that community here without people leaving? And I think that's probably...
I have many thoughts on this.
Yeah, there's probably a lot we could talk about. I think that we should table that.
Okay.
And come back to it.
I have many thoughts on it.
Yeah. Tyden, that's amazing.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And where should people go to find Alabama Creates and
AlabamaCreates.com.
That's it.
That's it.
Sweet. Love it.
Sick. Very exciting.
Thanks.